All right. Hey, everybody. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us. My name is Todd Richards,
And I'm Darko Vukovic.
and we are with the County Freedom Coalition. And in this podcast, we are interviewing people who are trying to advance liberty and freedom in the state of Colorado. And today we are joined by Gabe Evans. I see House District 48. Just one thing right off the bat. Where is House, since everything's been redrawn, where is House District 48?
Yeah, so the new House District 48 changed substantially from the one we had for 10 years. So now it starts about 120th Avenue, actually south of Brighton down in Adams County. Has all of Brighton, all of the unincorporated areas around Brighton and Adams County, and then follows the Highway 85 corridor up into Weld County, all the way up to, but not including Greeley. So on the west, up in Weld County, somewhere between County Road 17, 19, it kind of wanders around, but generally that area is the western boundary. And then on the east, it actually goes all the way out as far as like Kersey and then Highway 79.
Oh, that's quite a ways out there.
Yep.
It's that's a kind of a fun little square you got going there. Well, I guess it's not really a square, but it is pretty close. So, and then just to give people an idea of who you are, we just kind of go at this. So where were you born?
Born here in Colorado, Colorado
Oh,
native. Yeah, the hospital there in Aurora, like 225 in Mississippi.
oh yes, yep. Where'd you go to high school then?
So I was homeschooled, but I also participated in sports because we do have some freedom for homeschoolers here in
Oh,
Colorado. So I participated in sports all 4 years at Kiowa High School. So it's kind of a second home for me.
oh,
Lettered all 4 years. My picture, I'm told, is still on the wall down there because I made it to state senior year, which is pretty good, a pretty big deal for 2A schools.
yep. That's a big deal. And did you go to college?
I did back east in Virginia, conservative Christian school called Patrick Henry College. You can look it up.
Nice. And I believe you were in the Army. Is that correct?
Yeah, so sophomore year of college, like I said, back in Virginia, the recruiter comes to campus, and I come from a lot of folks in the military, and I'm like, I don't want to talk to him. He'll rope me in. So I ignored him the first day, ignored him the second day, and the third day I got weak, and I went over and I talked to him, and I talked to him again, and then next thing I know, I'd signed on the dotted line. So yeah, I joined while I was actually in college. It's what's called the simultaneous membership program, so both ROTC and then also I enlisted in the Virginia Army National Guard. So 2 years quasi enlisted. When I graduated in 2009, then I got my commission. Army sent me off to beautiful Fort Rucker, Alabama, where I learned how to fly UM-60 Black Hawk helicopters.
Yeah.
Knew I wanted to come back to Colorado because I'm a native, so I talked my way into the aviation outfit out at Buckley Air Force Base and basically spent the better part of a decade with those folks, both deployed overseas as part of Operation Enduring Freedom, and then every time we have wildfires and floods and all the stuff that the National Guard does here in Colorado.
Yep. You get busy, busy, busy. So yeah, a lot of
Do you,
people don't
do you
know.
still fly helicopters?
So I have my FAA commercial license, but married with 2 kids, I got a little family farm that I run. I just don't have the time to go back and do it. So yeah, I'd love to do it at some point. Get my kid learned up on how to fly, just because that's a career field that you can make pretty good money in it. And like a lot of these other blue collar jobs, these skilled trades, the pipeline for that is not as full as it could be. So if I can pass that on to my kid, I'd love to, but just got to get the time to go, dust it off for myself.
Yep. Yep. I was Air Force, and we were at Kirtland Air Force Base, and our detachment was at Fort Rucker, where we taught all the pilots to fly the UH-1s. So I never had the joy of going to Fort Rucker. I always passed it on to somebody else. So I did not ever get a chance to go down there. So missed out on that one. Bummer. So is this your first time running?
First time ever being a candidate. Yep.
All right. So why now? And then just why?
Yeah. So when my neighbor asks me that and makes fun of me and says, Gabe, I thought you were smarter than to get into politics, I say, well, I guess I'm dumber than you think, because I actually worked down at the state capitol as a legislative aide in 2005 for a couple of conservative legislators at the time. It's just always kind of been a simmering interest of mine. Like I said, after I went off, joined the Army, one thing we didn't talk about was I also spent a 10-year career with the Arvada Police Department, promoted a couple of times there, finished up as a lieutenant. And really, that's what pushed me back into this. I think most folks are probably aware that we're in the middle of a crime spike, crime tsunami, whatever you want to call it. Well, I lived that, and I saw not only the causes of it, which is some pretty horrible rulemaking from our elected officials down at the state capitol, but I saw the results of it in our community. And having sworn 3 separate oaths to uphold and defend the Constitution and take care of the community, I really couldn't fulfill those oaths in my capacity as a police lieutenant because of the horrible policies that the leftist dominated state's legislature was ramming through. And so I decided, you know what, if I can't have the impact that I want to have as a police lieutenant, well, by gollies, I'll try to push back and stand for freedom and justice in some other ways. So that happily coincided with the redistricting. House District 48 ended up being an open seat. By Colorado Constitution, legislators have to live in the district they're going to represent, and none of the sitting legislators lived within the newly drawn boundaries of House District 48. So some folks reached out to me, hey, Gabe, family man, Christian, the Army veteran, police officer, you got a little bit of a background in ag. Would you like to run? Here I am.
So how would that conversation go with your wife there?
Well, like I said, so I was a lieutenant, which is the first rank in most police departments where you're no longer paid hourly. You just get a wage, which means that whether you're working 40 hours or 90 hours a week, you get paid the same. And so at the time, we're having really bad attrition. It was either today or yesterday. The Fraternal Order of Police, Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police, and the County Sheriff's Association released some data that says that officers are leaving the profession in droves, which means that the folks that remain are just working more and more and more time. And so my wife was actually pretty happy when we started talking about, maybe making my final bows in law enforcement. I mean, because after she's been with me for the whole adventure, we met in college. So 12 years Army, 10 years law enforcement, all of the deployments, all of the different things. Can't blame her. She was ready for something where ideally I wouldn't get shot at, and I wasn't working 80 hours a week to get shot at.
Politicians still sometimes get shot at, though.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hopefully you don't get shot at.
That's why we said. That's why I said ideally. I usually say ideally or theoretically you don't get shot at.
Yeah.
We know.
Yep.
So
Darko,
curious, you mentioned that you felt like you were being held back as a police officer. Could you maybe elaborate on that? Like, where do you think that the source of that was? Was it the police leadership? Was it the the legislators? Was it the judges? Was it the city attorneys? Like, where do you think the system as a whole, which was intended to, provide multiple levels of security for people, so that one person couldn't abuse the system, in their favor or against the citizens? But where do you think the system's falling apart, or at least in your experience?
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. I think it was Thomas Jefferson that said that it's better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent person be wrongly incarcerated or punished. And I think most cops 100% are on board with that. Where the issue specifically came from here in Colorado was in the wake of a lot of the George Floyd riots, things like that in 2020. In the space of 16 days from introduction to governor's signature, the Colorado legislature, again, pretty much spearheaded by the left and the ACLU, forced a bill through called Senate Bill 2217. There was no dialogue really about it, just a whole lot of, hey, a bunch of folks that have never worked in law enforcement, we've decided that cops are the bad guys. So here's all the protections, and I say that in quotes. Here's all the protections that we're going to put into place. Well, I think like most of us know, heavy-handed, overreaching, one-size-fits-all government policy typically creates more problems than it actually solves. And that's what we saw with that particular piece of legislation. There's a whole lot of different things that it does. Some of the things that I saw most personally were it had a mandate that I don't have any problem with body cameras. But what the mandate said was that if an officer's body camera is not on, that officer can be basically presumed guilty and they have to prove themselves innocent. The actual language of the law says that the courts and basically anybody is allowed to assume misconduct anytime an officer's body camera is not running. And so what that did for cops is, first of all, you have the major morale blow where they're like, hey, everybody else gets to be innocent until proven guilty, but we have to prove ourselves innocent. We're presumed guilty in the legal language of this. That was a major blow to them. And then also the way it just changes the way that they're thinking. So, every time that you have interactions with the citizens, you're writing reports and making sure that all of those things are documented. So there's a fair amount of time in law enforcement world where you're actually sitting at a desk, and when you're recording, hours and hours of footage every day, you got to undock your body camera and go have that download all the footage. Well, if you're sitting at the desk, your body camera is, downloading somewhere. And that's when one of these major calls comes out. One of your officers is screaming for help, or, you get reports that there's shots fired at a bar, or somebody just tried to do a carjacking, something like that. Your first thought at that point has to be not how do I protect the citizens? How do I make sure that I'm safe? It has to be, oh, gee, I better grab my body camera and make sure that I put that on. And I've got to make sure that I turn that on, because otherwise everything is going to be, I'm going to be presumed guilty until I prove myself innocent. Same thing if you're out on the field. Sometimes we have these big scenes where, you may be standing around for several hours. And in the interest of being a good steward of taxpayer dollars and not recording hours and hours and hours of boringness, for the Arvada Police Department, the estimate was that we would be generating 1 terabyte of data every 7 days. So making sure that we're not just having, 87 hours of 15 different cops all looking at somebody's 6-foot privacy fence. The law, even that law says that you can turn your body camera off. Well, if all of a sudden the shooting starts or something exciting happens, again, your first thought has to be not how do I protect the citizens? How do I make sure that I go home myself? It has to be, got to remember to turn the body camera on. If you're in a physical fight, you got to make sure that if the body camera gets bumped off, that you're always making sure that that thing's on. Finally, because it says it has to be on all the time, it's intrusive to citizens. I mean, it's kind of funny that the ACLU pushed this, but they basically made police the digital surveillance for the state, because every time you talk to somebody now, it's all got to be recorded. So there's a lot of conversations that people have with cops that they really don't want to be recorded. If you call into law enforcement, because your 10-year-old was the victim of a violent assault, that's something that you probably don't want to be recorded for all posterity. That's something that you would probably like to protect and preserve your privacy interests, but unfortunately the cops' hands are tied. The law says it's got to be recorded. The law even says that they can't redact any part of that footage, and most of that stuff can be made releasable 21 days later. So that's just one piece of that law. It really did have a very, very negative effect on law enforcement in the state of Colorado. And to be completely honest, it actually took law enforcement backwards. A big part of being an ethical cop is just building relationships with the community. If nothing's going on, go out, stop by, talk to people, stop by, go check on your businesses, go walk through the park, have those interactions with the community so that you can build relationships with them, they can build relationships with you. But when everything's going to be recorded all of the time, a lot of times citizens don't want to talk to cops, and the cops are a little bit nervous about going out there and trying to have these interactions with their community the way that they used to.
So would you say that the events in 2020 and the legislation that was a result of that was a direct contributor to you resigning from the police force?
It definitely contributed to it. Yeah, I was looking at exit options before the redistricting was complete and House District 48 was determined to be an open seat. I was already exploring other options because, again, I'm married. I got 2 kids. There's a lot of other negative things from that bill that personally affect cops that I haven't even gotten into. But after 22 years of serving my country and serving my state and serving my community, if it's going to be personal, if I'm going to be personally liable for everything, and if the job, it takes a toll on people physically. There's a ton of peer-reviewed literature that shows that cops are at higher risk of heart attacks and cancer and a whole bunch of other different things. Just the sleep cycles that we have to have in order to be able to provide 24/7, 365 service to the community, it takes a toll on officers. And so, yeah, my wife and I were talking about, it'd really be great if these kids have a dad that doesn't die when he's 18, when the kids are 18 years old, because, you burned yourself out working all of the night shifts, or you worked 70 or 80-hour weeks just because the attrition was so bad. Somebody had to cover down and do it. So we were already, discussing what are we going to do? What's right for the family? And then, like I said, when this came up, absolutely, I was all in on being able to, go strike a blow for freedom and stand for some principles down at the very building that caused a lot of problems to our community, and resulted in Colorado suffering some of the problems that it's currently suffering.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was trying to empathize and put myself in the shoes of the police officers. And in my mind, it was kind of like, if the community isn't going to have my back, then why do it? Like, why take all the risk? Why carry all the weight of it? And, it's like, if you guys don't want me here, then, self-police, or like, I don't know what it's like, and it sounds a little vindictive, but in my mind, I was like, if we don't support people who take these challenges on, how do we expect them to bear with it? And I know it's similar, with police, and then also as a farmer, like I ask myself that same question in agriculture. If we're just going to be hitting people harder and harder with regulations and hoops to jump through, then who's going to do it? Who's going to step up, and why would they do it if we're not going to support it?
Yeah. No, and so a couple of thoughts on that. The truly frustrating part about all of this in law enforcement is quite often the community actually does support us. If you go look at a lot of the polling data, like I said, Fraternal Order of Police just released it. Officers say that they absolutely feel betrayed by politicians and the media, but typically they feel supported by their communities because they do have those relationships with the communities, and even the community understands what's going on, and they say, hey, look, the media blew this completely out of proportion. We were actually there. We saw what was going on. We think the media is just doing what the media likes to do sometimes. So that was a truly frustrating part, was not being able to serve the community, and the community feeling like they were betrayed too. Like, I mean, I felt like the Arvada community had my back when I was policing there. It was a lot of the folks down at the state capitol, though, that messed up that relationship and resulted in me giving inferior quality service to the citizens that I served. And then, we called ourselves crime historians, just having to show up and be like, oh, wow, that's terrible that all these things happened to you, citizen. Wish I could help you. I literally can't. My hands are tied. There's nothing I can do about this. You can only have those conversations so many times before, like you said, you sit there and think, what am I doing? I can't help the people that I'm trying to help. They want me to help them, but some other folks that thought they were smarter than everybody else down at the state capitol decided, nope, you've never worked in law enforcement, but here's what we're going to ram down everybody's throats. And that's why we're #1 in the nation now for auto theft, road rage violence, and bank robberies, and a lot of other things. I saw the people and the names and the faces. They're all people to me. They're not data points. They're not statistics to me. They're people with stories that are being victimized once by crime and then re-victimized by some terrible, terrible, short-sighted leftist policies.
And you mentioned there's a lot of bad attrition right now. Is there a categorical description of who's leaving and who's staying? My fear is that we're losing the most experienced or the most principled, and that we're being left with people who are maybe just going to wait it out and just sit back and kind of ride it out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and that's the scary part, is that normally when you see attrition, you either see folks, hey, I got my 20 years in, I could try to work for a few more years, or I could just take my 20 and be done. Or you see it at the front end of law enforcement, where they try it for a year or two and decide, this isn't for me. Where we're seeing the attrition right now is in like the 5 to 15 year gap. So this is a lot of very seasoned, very experienced officers. A lot of times, many of them are just a couple of years away from getting some sort of, either pension or retirement package or something like that, and they're walking away from it. It takes probably about 3 years to truly make a good patrol officer. It's probably 3 to 4 months before you even go to academy, just for all of the psych tests and the polygraphs and the screenings and the background checks and all the things that you have to go through. Then you're looking at 5 to 6 months in academy, and another 4 to 5 months of riding with an additional officer in what's called field training, just before you can get what they call on your own. You're driving your own car and you're not having to run everything by a senior officer. Once you make it on your own, it still takes another 2 to 3 years before you actually feel comfortable doing the job. And that's just to be a basic level, a basic patrol level officer. One of my specialties was fatal accident reconstruction. So once you start getting into some of these more advanced forensic investigative fields, like a forensic child abuse investigator, forensic accident reconstructionist, a homicide detective, you're looking at another 2 to 3 years to build the necessary experience before you have a competent person in these more advanced fields. And unfortunately, those are the folks that are leaving. These 10-year officers, 15-year officers that have decided, you know what, it's just not worth it for me. I don't mind taking a pay cut. I'm going to go be a real estate agent. I'm going to go do something else because then I know I'll actually be able to come home and see my families. And I know that I'm not going to be slowly killing myself due to the stress of trying to keep up with rising crime and fewer officers.
Yeah, and my fear is also that the many police officers might just become private security, and so then the wealthy elite will be able to hire them on and say, "Hey, I'm still good. I got my private police force now." People in the city, sorry, you guys are just gonna have to fend for yourselves.
Oh yeah, we see that all the time. Rules for thee, not for me.
Right.
Exactly. So as a police officer and being in the military, do you think that the average citizen should be able to possess the same equipment that the police officers do? Your average citizen getting to be able to defend off the criminal activity that's going on, because criminals are carrying around all kinds of high-powered weapons, and I'm not talking, our police department has a armored personnel carrier. I don't necessarily need an armored personnel carrier, but there's some high ballistic rifles that people are carrying around, and it would be nice to be able to have something other than maybe a Glock 19 or some small little caliber thing going up against these guys that probably have full automatic weapons. Do you think that the citizens should be able to defend themselves with the same type of weapons that they're being come after with,
And also gear and ammunition and things of
Yeah.
that sort as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the Second Amendment was probably my very first political issue. I'm a passionate pro Second Amendment supporter. I actually teach concealed carry classes now because I figure with 22 years of service in the military and law enforcement, I probably have a pretty decent background in both not only the legal decision making in self defense, but the morals, the ethicals, the emotional part of that, the actual tactics. So I work with a company that's composed mostly of former military and law enforcement people that are passionate about making sure that we equip citizens to have the tools and the techniques and the equipment and the training to be able to defend themselves. So yeah, I never met a bad guy that followed gun rules. That's kind of like a prerequisite for being a bad guy, is to break all of the rules. And I encountered quite a lot of armed citizens when I was a cop, and not one of the good guys ever tried to shoot me. So yeah, I'm pretty open to. I mean, we saw it up in Granby, right?
Oh yeah.
You remember the Granby Killdozer? A lot of the private citizens up there had heavier ordnance than law enforcement. So you had law enforcement asking, "Hey, can I please borrow your 50 cal to see if this will actually penetrate this bulldozer?" So yeah, like I said, I never met a good guy that tried to kill me, and I never met a bad guy that the laws would have actually stopped from possessing something.
What's your take, just as an instructor, curious, how does a citizen assess a situation? Do you have any advice for citizens other than obviously go get trained and maybe attend some real courses? But my concern is that in the heat of the moment, if a shootout begins, it's hard to tell who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's firing back, who's doing the attacking. Any advice for citizens in that situation who are concealed carrying?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll take it one step further than that. It's hard for law enforcement to do that. I mean, it's a term as old as time, the fog of war. It started off in military, but obviously policing as we know it is a very modern phenomenon. It only started in like the 1820s or 30s. So a lot of law enforcement terminology comes from the military because it is very applicable when you have those violent, deadly force on force encounters. And absolutely, the fog of war is something that people have known since the dawn of time affects your decision making in these encounters. So when I teach my class, I tell people there's a lot of slides in this class. If there's two things you take away from it, it's the firearm safety rules, because it only takes one negligent discharge to ruin everybody's day. And then the second thing we talk about is Colonel Jeff Cooper's color codes. So really what he talks about is situational awareness. And you can go Google it online if you've never seen these color codes before. But basically what he says is condition white is you're oblivious. We've all seen the videos of somebody that's texting on their phone and they, step off the curb, walk into the stop sign, something like that. If you're in condition white, it doesn't matter whether you're armed, not armed, you're unarmed because mentally you're not paying attention. the best thing that citizens can do is practice situational awareness for two reasons. Number one, bad guys read that stuff. Bad guys want soft targets. So they want easy victims. And so if the bad guys are out assessing a crowd, they're not going to pick somebody that looks like they're aware of what's going on. They're just automatically going to bypass that person. And so for a citizen that is carrying concealed, number one, you're probably never even going to be a victim in the first place just by having some situational awareness and being observant to what's going on around you. If you do unfortunately find yourself in a really bad situation, you happen to be in the King Supers up in Boulder when the shooting goes down, by practicing that situational awareness beforehand, you give your brain a little bit of time to get up to speed. About it like a car, right? Car performs best in the power band of the RPMs. Your brain's the exact same way. Practice that situational awareness. Be aware of what's going on around you, and then you'll be able to make better decisions in the moment because you're not going from 0 to 60. You took a little bit of time to be like, wow, something seemed odd. Something about that guy. Here's my exit. I'm going to go that way. One thing that we always preach is that as a concealed carry holder, you have no moral obligation to intervene just because of what you said. You may not have enough information to make a good decision. You're also not wearing armor. You're not wearing a uniform. You have no moral obligation to intervene. You can if you want, but we really stress, think through this stuff beforehand, because if the first time you've ever thought these thoughts is when the bullets are flying and you're in fear for your life, you're not going to make as good a decision then as if you had thought about these before and practice that awareness to give yourself the opportunity to get yourself up to speed.
So here's a question for you. I still do it. So when you go into a restaurant with your family, do you ever sit with your back to the door?
Nope. Not if I can help it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Still.
And so, I'm sorry, I'm passionate about this stuff. So to piggyback off of it, not only do I not sit with my back to the door, have that plan pre-built with whoever it is that you're going out. All right, honey, I have the gun. We got the 2 kids. So if something happens, I'm going to move here. You're going to grab the kids. You're going to go out that exit. You're going to call the police. You're going to tell them, hey, look, my husband's in there. He's a former cop. This is what he's wearing. He's one of the good guys. Make sure that they have my description so that responding officers can hopefully identify me and know, hey, that's the good guy. We always tell folks, as soon as you think it's safe to make sure you're holstering your firearm, putting it away so that you're not appearing like a threat to the officers. Because again, when they're coming in, they're trying to figure out a very volatile situation too. So I want to be a good helper and, do what I need to do, but then make sure that I'm not threatening to the responding officers as well.
Yep. Still do that. I get that pounded in your head for years and you'd still do it. So it's kind of funny to hear other people go, oh yeah, still check everybody out and sit with don't sit with your back to the door.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go a little different on there. So how do you define compromise? And is there any room for compromise when a citizen's constitutional rights are at stake?
Yeah. So to me, a citizen's constitutional rights, it says it in the Constitution. The Constitution shall be the supreme law of the land, and anything that's made that's not in accordance with the Constitution is unconstitutional. Where the issue is there, and what the left loves to do, is they love to argue and they love to nickel and dime and say, oh, well, that's not actually a constitutional right, or that's not a constitutional right. So you can see it in California, with all of their ridiculous even my students are usually shocked when I start talking about like reciprocity for concealed carry, and whatever you do, don't go to California because basically everything's illegal there. In California, they'll argue that a removable magazine, for a handgun or a rifle, oh, that's not part of your constitutional right. And so I think the definition really boils down to, who's defining these constitutional rights. Because what the left would love to do is say, oh yeah, we protect your constitutional rights, but then define everything that they dislike as being, well, that's not actually a constitutional right. So we can regulate that. We can take away your 30-round magazines. We have this red flag law here in Colorado. We can basically say that you're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. We can have a secret tribunal that says you're not fit to own firearms that you don't know about. And then when you turn around, now it's on you to prove, oh, yes, I actually can have my firearms and exercise my constitutional rights. So to me, that's where the battlefield is, in making sure that we protect our constitutional rights and not allowing them to redefine our rights as being something other than actually constitutional rights. I like to use two different terms because nobody wants a compromising politician. The term that I like is collaboration. And here's the story that I tell. As a police sergeant and a lieutenant, sometimes you get these big messy situations where, you know, in one particular case, we had somebody, he's on narcotics and he's armed with knives and he's moving in populated areas. So, you know, parks where kids are playing, things like that. So as a cop, I'm sitting there trying to balance both the public interest. I got to keep the public safe from this guy that's tripping out and armed with knives. But this guy also has constitutional rights too. You know, I don't want to use more force than I absolutely have to. And what I found was that even in a drug-induced frenzy, most guys are still with it enough to still be afraid of a police canine. They'll fight 10 cops, but they're afraid of the police canine. And so I would use that as a collaboration tool. Look, man, we kind of got you surrounded. We would really prefer not to fight you. That's why I have the dog here, and he's barking and doing scary police canine stuff. You don't want to get bit by the dog. I don't want to do 4 hours worth of paperwork associated with having to have the dog bite you. So it's not, to me, that's not compromise, because at the end of the day, I still accomplished my objectives. I respected the guy that's on drugs. I respected his constitutional rights and used the minimum amount of force possible. I protected the citizens, but I was able to find common ground to collaborate with this guy to successfully take him into protective custody, keep the community safe, not use more force on this guy than I have to. To me, I like using the word collaborate. I will try to find common ground to collaborate with people while understanding exactly what my principles are and knowing that I will not compromise those principles that I've sworn 3 separate oaths to uphold and defend.
Yeah, and for me, it's, you know I sometimes sound like a zealot, but it's the I think the left is very good at doing things in phases. So phase 1 might be something like, hey, we should regulate the number of bullets in a magazine to 10, and then the Republicans will say, no, 10's unreasonable, it should be 30. But that compromise actually sets a precedent that the government can regulate the number of bullets in a magazine. And so then next phase, it's going to be, oh my gosh, the shooter had 30, therefore it should be 15. And so it's these like moments when Republicans, I think, are trying to be polite, and I think are trying to compromise while still being reasonable to their citizens, but they inadvertently let the camel's nose under the tent and set it up so that it could be regulated and dialed down in the future.
Yeah, the Democrats are fantastic about that. So here in Colorado, does anyone know who John Morse is?
I don't know.
So John Morse was actually very high up in the Colorado legislature when they passed the magazine ban bill. And if you recall, we had all of the recalls that happened after that. Several legislators were successfully recalled. John Morse basically lost his political career over passing that 30-round magazine ban. Nobody remembers John Morse, but the terrible and he was a Democrat, if I didn't make that clear. Nobody remembers him. That's an acceptable casualty to the left. Is, hey, we lose a couple of people, they got their political careers destroyed, they got recalled, whatever. The policy's still here. We're still living with that policy 10 years later. So there's a saying that I've heard just kind of on the campaign trail that really resonated with me, having been involved in Colorado politics since 2004. And it was, conservatives like to be right, and the left likes to win. And so I think that we have to sit down and we have to take a long, hard look at, if we're right, we're ideologically right, but we're losing all the time. Are we actually right? And the left, as you said, they move in phases. They have a 20, 30, 40-year game plan. We can see it in the election now, stuff that they said 2 years ago, they're now 180 degrees backtracking on that. And so we have to find ways to not only be right, but also to win. Because if we're right and we lose all of the elections, they still get to make policies and they get to do whatever they want.
Yeah, and the left's opening position in a negotiation is we should ban all guns, right? And then the right's opening position is usually, no, we should keep it like it is, right? And so then if you split the difference at all, it's going to move in their favor. Versus if the right came in and said, no, we should repeal all gun laws. That's our opening position. Then all of a sudden you have a much wider gap to close, and any kind of compromise might find a position in the middle that's not advantageous to the left in every situation.
It's kind of like that tweet that Elon Musk sent out. There's like, hey, look, a few years ago, I used to be center left. But as the left goes further and further and further and further left, all of a sudden, somehow Elon Musk ends up being center right. So yeah, they're very, very good at that. And we basically have to think long term. And one of the big challenges with conservatives is we're very individualistic freedom lovers. And so for us to kind of all get together and get organized and figure out how are we going to defeat the, 4 decade long blueprint that they have, we have to have some sort of agreement and coalition on our side to be able to stand up. Because like Ben Franklin said, if we don't hang together, we'll surely all hang separately.
Yeah, no, and I self-identify as a liberal and a progressive, but both of those words have become so polluted that I can't identify as those anymore. Because they've lost the definition of those words has been so corrupted that it doesn't represent who I am at all. So it's like I'm in that same boat where I feel like the left has just gone so far left that I'm now in the middle going, what the hell happened here?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Kind of going back to that comment about how they like to redefine things. Throughout the ages, liberal, was what we would actually define today as conservative.
Right.
You look at like a liberal arts degree all through like the Middle Ages and coming up into early modernity. The liberal arts degrees were actually where like all of the people that we call conservatives now would be.
Yeah.
But they like to play games with language and redefine stuff.
Like Sam Adams was a liberal, and he's far more, by today's standards, far more conservative than I am. And I'm sure the same is true for many of the founding fathers as well.
Or even look at John F. Kennedy, what was a Democrat in the 60s would now be like a hard right in 2022.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep. I've often said to people that the left will nominate a hot dog, and they'll lock arms and lockstep together and make sure that hot dog gets elected. And we will fight over the littlest things, the teeny tiniest little things. And when when my person that I want it to be on the ballot doesn't get there, some people just say, well, I'm not going to vote. I'm just not going to do it. My candidate's not there. I'm not going to vote. And we're almost to the point where we just let them win, because people they're not going to go vote because somebody in the middle of their the ballot there didn't win, so they're not going to vote down ballot, or they'll stop, or won't even do anything at all. So yeah, I've said to a lot of people that we need to stop all this fighting and arguing with each other about just insignificant things, and like the left does, lock arms. And maybe you don't agree with who's up for governor, but she's who we have, and we need to vote for her. Everybody needs to vote for her, and right on down the line, make sure that we take back the House and get back in, even going smaller, take back the town boards and the school boards and all those teeny little things. Everything matters, all the way from the smallest position you can think of, somebody that works at the library, on the library board, all the way to the top, to the governor of the state. So something I think that we need to really start pushing for is we need to start acting like a responsible group of adults, and not throw a temper tantrum when our person doesn't make the ballot. So
Self-government's hard.
it is.
If it was easy, everybody would be self-governed. So, I think sometimes we forget how privileged we are to be involved in our government. And that's the price you pay if you want to continue to have that freedom and that prosperity and that security that comes from being self-governed.
Yeah. So Gabe, I saw on your website, your top 3 issues are public safety, cost of living, and educational choice. I could see from your story that a lot of those probably hold are very closely related to your personal experiences. How did you select those? Did you pick those as kind of top issues for the states, or are those more so meant to represent the top issues that you can champion and advocate given your experience and background?
Yeah. So I actually selected those issues, as you very astutely noted, because I do have a lot of personal connections to all 3 of those different things, but also because for the last couple of years here in Colorado, as we've just been talking about, the conservatives are trying to get some sort of agreement together so that we can all have generally the same message to be able to counter what the left likes to push. So if you're not familiar with the commitment to Colorado, it was something that was rolled out a couple of years ago, and the commitment to Colorado says what? At the end of the day, good government revolves around actually being responsive to the day-to-day, actual practical dinner table needs of the constituents. And so they did a lot of polling and a lot of study, and they said, hey, look, the things that most citizens in Colorado are concerned about are rising crime, cost of living, and making sure their kids get a good education. And so those are things that I think are, that there's a lot of common ground on those. And so really, the conservatives, the Republicans in Colorado have been trying to coalesce around those issues. And so not only because I personally agree with them, but also, as we talked about, to try to find some of that unity to be able to stop the tide of all of the stuff that the left is pushing, I was more than happy to say, yep, I can agree to those three things as the top issues, from a perspective of unity, from a perspective of my own personal beliefs, and from a perspective of I've been knocking on doors since April. Pretty much without fail, one of those three things resonates with every single person that I talk to. And it boils down to being a good representative in a representative style government and being responsive to constituents and citizens' needs.
Right. And on the education side, so how much of that is a need for dismantling versus reforming? I'm a big proponent of, school choice, vouchers, private schools, homeschooling. I think that all that's very, very good. I do share the concern that I think a lot of people, maybe in the middle and the left, have, which is, well, if you start pulling away from the public schools, what shape is that going to leave the public schools in? What's your message to somebody who maybe has kids in public school and for whatever reason couldn't take advantage of these other opportunities you're trying to present them, who's concerned that public schools will suffer if such a program were implemented?
Yeah. So I think the question becomes, what are we actually trying to do here? Are we trying to preserve the existing system without changing that, or are we trying to get kids educated? And I fall on look, guys, this should all be about the kids. If we're talking education, everything should be about the kids, and then broadening that out about the families, because all of the data and all the statistics show if a kid has a supportive family that's engaged with the education, they're going to do so much better. You could send a kid to the best school on the planet, but if they're not really engaged with the family, then a lot of times those kids struggle. So that's why I'm generally a fan of having the resources follow the student. And so if people want to take those resources and go to the public school, that's fantastic. If people want to take those resources and go somewhere else, then again, I think this needs to be very much student and family centric. And it's not like we're protecting the public schools anyway with the status quo. I saw on the news just this morning, Denver Public Schools is looking at closing 10 different schools. That's been going on for decades. Jefferson County has that every year where they have to talk about closing public schools. So it's not real, and again, it's not even necessarily tied to enrollment. It can just be tied to shifting demographics. Hey, this 20 years ago, this was the young neighborhood where everybody was raising their kids. But now it's kind of transitioned. And so now it's a bunch of empty nesters that live in that neighborhood because they liked it. They didn't leave. So where you might have needed 2 elementary schools there, now you only need 1 just because of the demographics of that community and as the communities shift and change. So I think that being rigidly locked into, a one-size-fits-all bureaucracy typically doesn't do anybody favors. And I think that we need to redirect the emphasis to parents, to kids. And, it's not going to change things that much from the status quo where they're already having to make a lot of those decisions. And they were having to make those decisions long before, all of these seems like a lot of these discussions about school boards and parents and curriculum kind of started during COVID when parents saw it was happening. All of these discussions about which schools do districts close were happening long before that anyway. So the status quo wasn't being that kind to the public school system either.
Yeah, no, I saw an article today, I believe, that it said that kind of standardized test scores have fallen back to where they were in the early 90s. So in the last couple of years, we've regressed over, I guess, 2 decades of educational progress, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, so the current statistic is 60% of Colorado kids can't pass their 3rd grade reading test. So the idea is if you can't read by third grade, you're going to struggle through the rest of school because, when your fifth grade homework comes home, if you're struggling just to read it, how can you actually focus on what you're supposed to be learning if you're trying to read it? So 60% of third graders can't pass their reading test. 70% of them can't pass their eighth grade math test. And I think that's terrible. And a lot of other parents are agreeing with me on that.
What's your advice to parents who are debating on whether they should homeschool their kids or send them to a public school, where kind of the prevailing argument that in public school they get to experience lots of different kids from lots of different backgrounds, they get more integrated into society versus at home? Yes, there might be opportunities through sports programs or church, but it's still going to be a much more selected group of people that they would interact with.
Yeah. No, it's a question that's been around, ever since 1992 when my parents started homeschooling me. And the fact is, now that we actually have several decades of data on homeschoolers, the data just doesn't bear that out. Pretty much every study that you want to go look at that looks at homeschoolers says that they're actually more involved in the community, they're more civically minded, they're more willing to engage with people from a variety of different backgrounds. The statistic that I remember off the top of my head is that your average person in public school is engaged in like 2 to 3 extracurriculars or something like that. Your average homeschooler is engaged in like 5. It's true for my kids. It's true when I was growing up. So yeah, there's a lot of folks that have a lot of questions about the socialization aspect of it. And like I said, several decades of data just really doesn't bear out that that's a major concern.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's see here. What else? What else would be a good one we just covered? So who has more jurisdiction, the city versus the county versus the state, or state versus the federal government? And are you comfortable directing local law enforcement to defend the constitutional rights of citizens against law enforcement of a higher authority, which is enforcing laws which you deem to violate citizens' constitutional rights, for example, as a citizen attending a church service?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, everything that we have in our Republican form of government ties back to the Constitution and the structure of government that the Constitution establishes. So, in that respect, you do have, in some places, kind of this top down, hey, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. And then you have states and local governments that are, because of the 5th and 14th Amendment, they are also held to that constitutional standard that they must respect and uphold citizens' constitutional rights. So that's part of the brilliance of the founding fathers, is I think most folks know we've got the 3 branches of government, and they're all supposed to be in a little bit of competition with each other so that no one branch consolidates all the power. They also did that. That's why they call it, the federal government, from the word feudal, which is talking about, multiple layers top to bottom in the government as well. So you have the federal government, you have the states, you have the local government, and they're all checks on each other as well, ultimately with the goal of preserving citizens' freedom and citizens' constitutional rights. And we see that all the time. Florida sues the feds because they think that the feds have overstepped. And then other states join in on the suits. You see it with counties suing states and things like that. And so I think that brilliant tension really does ultimately benefit the citizens. I've worked for all 3 different levels of government, fed, state, and local. And the numbers that I tell people is that the local government, I would argue, actually controls about 60% of your life. The state controls 30, and the feds control about 10% of your life. Because if you look around, your local police department, your local district attorney, your local planning, zoning, building, your local, as you were saying, school board, library district, that basically controls everything that you see around you. And so, going back to the old adage, ownership is 9/10 of the law. I think that enables that local government to have a ton of influence, to be responsive to their citizens, to protect those citizens' rights. And when they don't, then they're a lot closer to the people. An example that I like to give is just this, last couple of years, when all of the lockdowns related to COVID were in full swing. Boulder County on Halloween night, they were all proud of the fact that they wrote, I think it was 29 social distancing tickets to trick-or-treaters who weren't out wearing their masks properly and staying 6 feet apart. You go 20 miles to the east in my neighborhood, Fort Lupton, it was Halloween as normal. That is 100% a result of local governments, either in the case of Weld County, and the mayor here in Fort Lupton standing up for people's citizens' rights because they know that there's going to be a reckoning if they don't. And then, unfortunately, some of our neighbors over there in Boulder, being more than willing to go along with social distancing tickets. So, yeah, all of that to say, the left likes to define and split hairs on everything. I think that all three levels of government have to make sure that they are taking that constitutionally mandated stand to protect the rights of their citizens. And we saw it in Weld County. I totally supported when Weld County said, nope, all county commissioners, the sheriff and the district attorney, we're not going to play ball. To me, I think that was an appropriate exercise of the authority that they have as local elected officials. There was a second part to that question, and I don't remember what it was. I think it was, would you feel comfortable? Yeah. So, I mean, I was the cops during the pandemic. I was a lieutenant. And so in Jefferson County, which is unfortunately a blue county, we would get the calls all the time. Oh my gosh, there's people out on the park and they're not social distancing. You need to go out. You need to go write them a ticket. And so kind of going back to these previous discussions about, how conservatives need to be a little bit more consistent and cohesive in messaging our actual values and beliefs. As a lieutenant receiving that call, I could, go yell at them and be like, nope, we're not going to do it. Or I could explain it to them. And so what I would usually explain to folks is, all right, well, if I go out there and I go write somebody a social distancing ticket, they now have a constitutional right to face their accuser in a court of law, which now means that I have to have a city prosecutor and a defense attorney and a jury and a judge all impaneled to come in to go figure out this social distancing ticket that you wanted to write. And the fact is, constitutional right, they're not guilty until they're convicted by a jury of their peers, which then means we have to send out a bunch of subpoenas to people to come in to be a part of that jury. And so then I would ask the person, do you believe in this social distancing ticket enough to where you would be willing to come in and spend a day sitting in a jury box shoulder to shoulder with your peers to, render a decision on this case? And what I found was when I would explain it to people that way, they would understand, oh, hey, wow, that actually makes a lot of sense. No, actually, I don't think you should go write that social distancing ticket. So I could stand up for my conservative values, but also hopefully try to just change somebody's way of thinking so that in the future, they would think through stuff like that and be like, oh, hey, actually, maybe the government isn't necessarily always the solution to these things here. So yeah, I was absolutely 100% comfortable, as local law enforcement, not enforcing these social distancing mandates, directing my officers and my sergeants, no, we're not going to enforce these things. But then also being able to, like I mentioned earlier, being able to collaborate with the community and explain to them the why behind it in the hopes of hopefully converting them a little bit, to my conservative way of thinking and showing them how my conservative values actually do make sense.
So there's one part of the equation, which is the non-enforcement, and I'm glad to hear your position on that. What happens when, let's say, the state directs somebody to go enforce a law, or let's say the president, because you're running for state house. So let's say the president passes a law that says that, let's use the red flag law as an example. Should the local police intervene and say, hey, this is unconstitutional, you can't be doing this? And any citizen who is faced with this decision, we want you to call us because we want to be there and present to tell that agency to, politely leave our county. Should law enforcement agencies get involved with one another, or is that an issue that, they just don't step on each other's toes and it's up to the courts to reconcile that issue if rights were actually violated?
Yeah. I mean, having actually been to war, having seen, what happens when it actually comes down to fighting, I think everything that we can do to resolve these things peaceably, you got to do everything to resolve it peaceably. I mean, the Declaration of Independence says that, governments long established should not be changed for light and transient purposes, and that mankind is more disposed to evil while the evils are sufferable. So even the Declaration of Independence lays out, all of the hoops that the colonies went through in order to preserve their rights before they even got anywhere close to, declaring this independence. And so I think that we have to exhaust all peaceable means first. But you also have to be smart. I've come from the vast bureaucracy. I've worked for the vast bureaucracy in the federal government, the state government, the local government. And I think, like we've talked about before, that's the importance of having good, solid people in those positions, because they know how to peaceably fight those fights and still stand up, for their citizens' rights. So, I think a fantastic example of that is our sheriff here in Weld County. I'll be completely honest, he is the reason I live in this county, because I like the stands that he takes on things. And I was like, I'm gonna live in that county, and I'm gonna vote for that guy because I support the way that he does things. And so our Sheriff Reams, came out and said, I'm not enforcing the red flag bill. I will sit in my jail before I go do it. And then you had all of the political moving and maneuvering and lawsuits and this and that. And so it was all peaceable. Our sheriff was able to peaceably stand up for citizens' rights, and still say, yeah, we're not enforcing those things.
Could he take it one step higher and say, and any agency coming to our county to enforce those laws will be, detained or arrested by my deputies because I'm not going to let those laws be enforced in my county by any agency?
Yeah, you could. And then you have the whole cost benefit analysis of, what is the retaliation going to be? And is the retaliation going to be worse for a whole bunch of people than if we just stopped and said, I'm not enforcing those things? And then if somebody comes, now you have to seek other means to sort that out. So, it boils down to a very delicate cost benefit analysis there. If you say, hey, I'm going to go arrest somebody with the FBI, well, then what they're probably going to do is they're going to shut off all of your access to all of the criminal justice systems that law enforcement has, which then means that you're not going to have the ability to see if anybody's got a warrant. You're not going to have the ability to really cooperate with any other agencies. They will work to isolate you. They basically shut you off. They can disconnect you from the system. And if you're disconnected from the system, now we're back to like 1940s, trying to solve crimes in a 2022 world where unfortunately everything does flow through the massive databases and internet and all of the interconnected different systems that are out there. So having to make that cost benefit analysis of, okay, yeah, I arrest the FBI agents, and now I'm basically not able to provide law enforcement services to a community of 340,000 folks, and all of the bad guys are going to know that I can't even see if they have warrants or not. So, like I said, I think there's a lot of practical wisdom that comes in there in making that decision.
Is there a place where you feel like that line should be drawn, or is it always situational and subjective?
So I'm kind of a geek for history, and one of the things that I love studying in history, depending on whose data you use, it's something like 50 to 60 major civilizations have existed in the history of the world, starting with the ancient Egyptians and Sumerians all the way up to present day. And of those civilizations, not very many of them are around. So I like studying the rise and fall of civilizations and, kingdoms and empires and revolutions and things like that. Typically what I see, and it bears out, even in our own American history, is it seems like when you get about a 2/3, 1/3 split, that's when things start to get really unstable, because 1/3 of people is still a pretty large group of people. But they know that they don't really have any, if there's 2/3 of people on the other side, that's a super majority. They don't really have any sort of way to, legislatively pursue what it is that they want to pursue. And so when across the entire realm, so like California is hard left, but people still have the option to flee California, to flee New York, to flee Illinois, to leave those places and come to more conservative states. I think that you typically see things start to become very unstable when, across the entire range of a society, you've got that 2/3, 1/3 split. Because then the 1/3 feels like, hey, my back's against the wall. I got too much to lose. And, now I have to think other thoughts. I don't think we're anywhere close to that here in the United States. I think we still have a very even 50-50 split. You got some ridiculous states, you got some very conservative states, and I think there's a lot of peaceful options for folks to pursue, that are frustrated with maybe the way their local, Boulder. Okay, leave Boulder, move to Weld County. We'll welcome you with open arms. That's why I left Jefferson County. So I think there's a lot of peaceful options that have to be explored before you get up to that trip point my own historical analysis suggests that that trip point is when you've got like a society-wide 2/3, 1/3 split. And I don't think we're anywhere near that.
Cool. Thanks.
Interesting. So, anything you want to add to your why people need to vote for you, and touch on your plans and what your ideas for the future are? And when we talk to you again, we'll be talking to Representative Gabe Evans, and not just old Gabe Evans, a retired cop and retired Army guy. You know, what's why do people need to vote for you?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you got three options in this particular election. You know, there's three candidates that are running. I think I'm far and away the best candidate because of my actual practical experience. You know, there's three branches of the government: legislative, executive, judicial. Most of my time has been spent in the executive, which is the branch that has to make these decisions. That's the enforcement branch. So I'm not somebody, you know, just kind of pie in the sky, abstractly coming into the legislature, you know, hoping that I can make some good rules. I've spent the last 22 years executing the rules that other people have made. I've seen the good stuff, and unfortunately, quite often, I've seen the terrible stuff. So bringing that practical, real world experience, that practical, real world perspective to the Capitol is something that really neither of my opponents have. And one of the things that I learned as a result of those two fields was, you know a lot, but you also realize there's a lot of stuff that you don't know. Like I alluded to earlier with law enforcement, good law enforcement should be out building relationships with their community at all times, regardless of whether or not crime is happening. That's something that's very important to me as a representative, is making sure that I have those connections with as many different stakeholders in the community as possible. So when I'm down in the Capitol and the left is up to their tricks of introducing something today to vote on it tomorrow to get it signed by the governor, 3 days later, and there's a very, very limited amount of time to be able to, first of all, even read what the bill is, much less be able to figure out the negative impacts of it. By having those relationships with the community and having those stakeholders in the community, I can actually do my job as a representative. Be like, hey man, I'm sorry I'm sending you this text at 10 o'clock at night. I really need you to look at this. You're kind of one of the subject matter experts in my community about this particular topic. I need some feedback on it. And if you can, I need your help to help me testify either for or against or in support of a modification to this thing. Because, I know law enforcement, but there's a lot of folks in my community that know a lot about a bunch of stuff that I don't know. And there's a lot of cops in my community that are going to have a different perspective on stuff that I may not have. So being able to actually have those relationships and bring all of those voices to the Capitol, I see it kind of like how I did things when I was a commander in the Army. I'm the figurehead, but I'm there to kind of support and literally represent the folks in my district to stand up for these constitutional rights, for these values, and make Colorado a better place, not just for here and now, but for my kids, for everybody else's kids, for future generations. And I have the practical experience to do that. And I have the integrity to understand when I don't know things and to be able to reach out and get that feedback from the community.
Very nice. Practice speech, huh? Said that a bunch of times. I can tell.
I feel it was a little longer than some of my other speeches, but the gist is the same.
Yep. And then good old military leadership, always seems to pop in there when I can tell, when somebody's prior military and they have, a little bit of leadership skills and practices, they pop that in there. And it's always good to hear that, because some people just don't understand that what a true leader is. And the military is pretty good at putting those good people out there. So good to know. And yeah, I like what you're saying, and I really do hope that you win your election, and hopefully you can come back on here maybe middle of the February, March, or April and tell us, is it everything you expected it to be? And now you got this pretty little name badge with representative on there, and you got a spot, and and tell us what you've been up to, and how things are moving forward as a representative. So do appreciate you.
I'd absolutely love to come back on. And that was, if I win this election, one of the first things I'm going to do is we're going to have a published schedule for the town halls that I'm going to hold, just because I've been high up enough in both military and law enforcement organizations to know that unless you consciously force yourself to get back to your roots, you're going to drift eventually. So that was some very good advice that I was given at the very start of this campaign was, Gabe, when the legislature is in session, if at all possible, and and sometimes if we're not in the majority, the left controls the calendar. So they may pull a fast one on you and you may have to, move some dates around. But if at all possible, try to hold a town hall once a month in your district when the legislature's in session. So that's something that I've taken to heart. And if I win this election, I'm going to make sure that as best as I can, at least once a month, I'm putting myself out there for people to come and talk to me.
Very good. Well, I hope that all works out well for you, and things go good. And the way way things sound, I hope you do have some pretty tough districts there, or counties, places in those counties, cities in those counties. It's pretty tough to win as a conservative or a Republican. So hopefully these last 2 years have maybe changed some people's minds.
Well, and then like I said, at the end of the day, I'm usually, because I worked in a blue county for 10 years. I'm pretty good at finding that common ground to collaborate with people and show them, look, do you think your life is better or worse now than it was 2 years ago or 4 years ago?
Right.
And then show them how my conservative principles actually really do make sense.
Yep. All right. Darko, you got anything before we close it out?
No,
there?
just thank you very much. Thank you for your service. I enjoyed the conversation today, and we would love to have you back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know when, and I'll see if we can squeeze it in.
All righty. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks.
You bet. Bye.